Hello, I'm Lucy McDaid and welcome back to a new parliamentary term here in Westminster with already a lot to talk about. There's a new look cabinet, new jobs for some of our West Country MPs, but still there's a thorn in Sir Keir Starmer's side from the right. Also, our NHS trusts have had a health check-up, but not all of them got the results they wanted. And now Angela Rayner's out. What's next for her devolution revolution across our region? Well, joining me in the studio tonight, we have the Labour MP for South East Cornwall, Anna Gelderd. We have the Liberal Democrat MP for Cheltenham, Max Wilkinson, and the Conservative Group Leader on Wiltshire Council, Richard Clewer. We've got a political spread and a geographical spread tonight as well. Thank you all for coming on the programme. First, there was a back-to-school feeling here in Westminster as MPs returned from their summer break last week. But a so-called reset for Sir Keir Starmer was overshadowed by a row over stamp duty and the resignation of Angela Rayner that then followed. A planned reshuffle then became an even bigger one, with promotions for Bristol's Darren Jones and Plymouth's Luke Pollard. The PM says his new look Downing Street will help him go further and faster to deliver the change that he promised voters last year. Let's talk about that. Max Wilkinson, will come to you first. Do you think Keir Starmer's in trouble now he doesn't have Angela Rayner at his side?
Well, it seemed like he was in a bit of trouble when she was at his side after what happened, and it was unfortunate. I'm one of those people who tends to think that Angela Rayner got a raw deal in general, but it clearly became
Why did she get a raw deal?
Well, that's for other people to conclude. I think in these circumstances it was unavoidable that she ended up resigning. Clearly, there were too many questions to answer. The fact that she was buying a house so far away from her constituency obviously was raising alarm bells. Now, the thing for the government now is that it needs to focus on delivering on those things that it said it was going to do before. And if they're rearranging their cabinet, that's potentially becoming a distraction from delivering on those things that people want. It's making sure the NHS works. It's making sure things work well at the local hospital. It's making sure you get a GP appointment. It's making sure that people feel like they're getting good value for money on their taxes. And fundamentally, they do need to work much, much harder to get the economy right. And after that, other things will fall into place. And of course, we'll, I'm sure, talk today about the migration issues as well that the government has failed to get on top of.
Anna Gelderd, we spoke about that wider reshuffle then. Does this mark a turning point for Sir Keir Starmer's government?
Well, as you made clear there, the planned reshuffle has, of course, been wider and potentially more in-depth. What we've seen, I think, this week is decisive but not hasty decision-making.
Decisive because there's been a lot of drama?
I think decisive because there's always going to be a new phase of government in year two. We're looking at delivery and growth, whereas before, in the previous year, it was all about fixing the foundations. So some of those appointments, I think you can really see reflected there. For example, you mentioned Luke Pollard, a colleague in the region, and his role has now been beefed up and changed to look at defence as an engine for growth. So, of course, there's been a lot going on this week, and I know viewers and constituents have been concerned about some of those things that are happening here. I think what's really good to see is the right people getting into those right jobs as part of that reshuffle.
Richard Clewer, has Keir Starmer handled some of this drama over the past week well?
He's been dealt a tough hand. He had an unexpected reshuffle forced on him by events. But it leaves me feeling rather concerned. And let's be frank, when Labour were elected, they had some very clear ideas, some of which I would agree with, some of which made sense. And since then, they're making very little progress on delivering them. And I say that with a heavy heart. The country needs to see the NHS resolved. It needs to see the finances of the nation sorted out. To move people around, to take them from one job into another after a year, I mean, it takes you 3-4 months to really get to know your brief, and that's if you're switched on top of it. So I fear that it will create a period, a hiatus where people are moving jobs, trying to work out what they're now going to do, understand that brief in detail. What we desperately need is a cogent, coherent direction for the country as to how to address and how to resolve the problems we're facing. OK, immigration is the problem of the day, but the finances are the critical one.
Anna, in his first cabinet meeting post-reshuffle, Sir Keir Starmer appeared to make a bit of a dig at reform. Is that an acknowledgement that Nigel Farage's party is the opposition now?
I think there's been an acknowledgement that the Reform Party is clearly speaking to people and on the rise there. There's been that acknowledgement for a while. I think it's important to see the government reflecting it. I mean, let's be clear, the Conservatives are the official opposition. We have lots of different parties in the country that we have to be talking across and making sure that we're getting our message as Labour across to all of those voters. But absolutely right, that we're focusing on reform as part of that picture.
Well, they need to be held to account, don't they? At the moment, reform's getting effectively a free hit day after day after day. Nigel Farage, as we know, is a very good communicator, but there is very little beneath the veneer of the messages that he puts out there. He's very good at shouting about things that are going wrong and saying very simple things to put it right, but ultimately everyone knows reform doesn't really have very much to say about the economy, other than if you have no migrants coming into the country, the economy will be fixed, and we'll fix the NHS if we've got no migration. We need to have a much more detailed debate about what reform is actually saying and what they're proposing. And at the moment, unfortunately, that isn't quite happening.
Richard, I'm going to come back to you, but let's first, not Nigel Farage, but let's listen to the Reform Group Leader on Wiltshire Council, Richard, you'll know him, Ed Rimmer, on what he thinks the party's electoral chances are in the South West.
I think that we're now in a position that we don't really have areas where we're thinking, oh, well, we're never going to win there, so we won't bother. I just think that that's not the case anymore. We're not going to win everywhere. Obviously, some places we're going to do better than others, but I think the fact that we won 10 seats in Wiltshire and we came second in 46 in what would possibly demographically be one of our least good counties in the whole country. If we can do that here, I think it just shows what can happen. The general public are actually interested in a lot of the issues that we have been talking about. You know, the small boats immigration problem, for example, is now, a topic that no one in this country hasn't heard about and hasn't talked about and hasn't heard something about. But Nigel Farage was out there 5 years ago telling everybody, look, we need to sort this out.
Richard, Ed Rimmer there saying Nigel Farage was one of the first politicians to talk about the small boats crisis. Is reform onto something there?
Sadly, a more open, honest debate about immigration, it's been a long time coming. And we have to be honest about the way people are feeling and some of the impacts that come with that. I mean, if we just look at the housing crisis that we have as a country, if you're bringing in 1 million people a year and only building 220,000 houses on an average household size, you're creating a housing crisis. So sadly, there are issues there that need addressing. I strongly suspect, and as you say, I think reform need a lot more scrutiny, because immigration as an issue has got to be resolved long before the next general election. And their economic policies, I mean, if you look at the latest set of economic policies, how many billion adrift was it? 80 billion by a good or by the best estimate from the Office of Budget Responsibility on their proposals.
It's Fantasyland stuff, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Fantasyland stuff. And actually, if you then look at what we're talking about in migration, there is a Brexit effect on migration here. When we were in the EU, we had return agreements basically with every other European Union country. Farage's last big idea was Brexit. That made it more difficult for the current government and the last government to deal with any issues that are arising with small boats.
Quickly, Max, is Keir Starmer right to give Nigel Farage the airtime that he does?
Well, Nigel Farage is getting a lot of airtime from the media regardless. It's right.
But he is in the House of Commons as well.
Well, he's very rarely in the House of Commons, as those of us who are there every day know. But actually, what we need to be doing is giving much more scrutiny to Nigel Farage and to reform, because the country needs to know what's going to happen if they end up in charge. They don't have any real solutions for the migration problem other than pointing at things and saying it's wrong and scapegoating and demonising and using divisive language. It might be a good political tactic in the short term, but in the longer term, it will be disastrous for this country. And let's not forget, Farage's last big idea was Brexit, and that has been a disaster, including for migration.
OK, I'm going to end it there because we do need to move on now. Next, South Western Ambulance Service is one of the worst performing in the country, according to newly released NHS league tables. The service was rated poorly for response times, though the Trust says it's working to reduce delays. Bath and Plymouth were ranked in the bottom 25 trusts in the country, but it was better news for Cornwall and Bristol, who are in the top 25. The government says the point of the list is to drive up standards. And I suppose greater transparency, accountability, that could only be a good thing.
I agree completely. I really welcome the government's moves to publish more information and bring in constituents to have views on how we do this. With the government's neighbourhood health service plans, what's really exciting is that Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly is part of that first wave of rollout. So something I've been really working with constituents on is what kind of services do they want to see closer to home? And when we look at these league tables, there's a mixed picture. There's some really good news for Cornwall in terms of acute care, and there's some really difficult news, which I'm not surprised to see based on the constituents that I see on a weekly basis in my surgery when they're trying to access mental health support and other non-acute services. So I think it reflects what we were expecting to see. I think it's going to be helpful to make progress. And I'm so delighted that Cornwall is in wave one of those rollout plans, because neighbourhood health services are one of the things I got in government to try and deliver for people locally. I know that's what people want to see.
Max, Anna alluded to it there actually. You know, Cornwall ranked quite highly in the league tables. Gloucestershire was, I think, 17. But actually, in Cornwall, ambulance response times, mental health support was ranked much lower. Is this league table method too simplistic?
I think one of the criticisms was that the league tables won't tell you how you're going to be treated if you actually visit that NHS trust. In Gloucestershire Hospitals Trust, one of the main debates now is about having Cheltenham and Gloucester Hospital and how the two are quite close to one another, and it's almost pitched as a competition, and Cheltenham's having overtime services removed and they end up in Gloucester, and sometimes there are some services that are removed from Gloucester and put in Cheltenham. Now that has ended up with all sorts of unintended consequences. We have long delays at A&E, and that's quite often people's experience of going to the Hospitals Trust. But also we've got this issue in Cheltenham with the maternity unit, which has been closed temporarily, apparently, for almost 3 years. The Trust told us that when they solved the midwifery recruitment and retention crisis, that it would be reopened. We still haven't seen a schedule for the reopening of the midwife unit for the birth and labour. And that means that we've got a real issue in Cheltenham. If you are an expectant mother, then you can't go to your local hospital and actually start your family there. That's a really difficult thing for a town that has 120,000 population and actually serves a much, much wider area. And of course, Lucy, you're aware of the issues that there have been with maternity care and flagging up issues of culture, which are having to be resolved by the Trust as well.
Yeah, and we cover those, not just in Gloucestershire, but Somerset recently as well. We see them all across the region. Richard, we talk a lot with the NHS about jobs, about pay, strikes. We've seen so many of those. Is there a danger here that seeing that your area where you might want to get a job in is ranked really poorly, is this going to affect job retention, recruitment, morale?
It may have a small impact, but I think data is absolutely critical. When I ran Wiltshire Council, I used data to direct pretty much everything we did, because if you've got good data, you know what's going on and therefore you know how to resolve it. I've spent years now chairing the Integrated Care Partnership for Bath, Swindon, Wiltshire, attending the Integrated Care Board. Data in the NHS it's a wash with information, but usable data is very hard to find. And we really have got to get that focused lens on the kind of service delivery, and particularly to enable some good data to come out on the preventative. As you say, the neighbourhood. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced, my years in local government, prevention works and health prevention works. And we've got to take this away from, we're lost with hospitals. We've got to get down to channeling funding and support into evidence-based work at the GP level, at primary care, at the neighbourhood collaboratives, to start reducing demand, and actually that's what's going to fix the NHS.
Does this method work though? Because as we said with Cornwall, for example, Cornwall came out quite well, but actually you've got lots of problems there with ambulance response times, with mental health support. Max was talking about challenges in Gloucester with maternity services. Is this hiding actually a crisis that you might have in lots of other areas, and therefore would it detract attention away from Cornwall, when actually Cornish MPs are always saying in Parliament about the challenges that are faced in coastal rural communities?
Well, this is part of a wider government picture where Cornwall and rural coastal communities are much more firmly on the map. I mean, you've seen new MPs really championing the cause of Cornwall in Parliament, and I don't think more data and more information sharing is ever a bad thing.
Will
I think
Wes Streeting look at these rankings and think, oh, Cornwall's doing really well?
I wouldn't speak for Wes, but I know he is the sort of person that really looks down into the detail and is really focused on those left behind communities. So coastal and rural communities like mine in South East Cornwall, we know we have different challenges, and the government's very aware of that.
Okay, let's move on. A never-ending debate, it seems, about Devolution. The English devolution bill is moving through Westminster, and this weekend a public demonstration is expected to take place with people calling for a devolved Cornish Parliament. Now, as it stands, the bill aims to bring in more regional mayors and create more unitary councils. With Angela Rayner gone, the person now charged with steering the plans is Steve Reid. But there's real debate in Cornwall over whether it should share a mayor with Devon, something Labour MPs to the east of the Tamar support. Anna, I'm going to come to you first on this. Now, you are very, very close to the Tamar, but a Cornish MP. Where do you stand? Would you like to see Cornwall and Devon share a mayor?
I've been really clear since the beginning. I want to see service improvements in South East Cornwall. Cornwall's very specific and unique. We are not like any other area of the country. I brought forward a Cornish Heritage and Language Bill to celebrate our unique status. And I work with people across the region to make sure our services are improved. Now, South East Cornwall is particularly different in the rest of Cornwall. And I don't speak for the whole of Cornwall, only for South East Cornwall. In our position, we've got 23% of the Babcock jobs in Devonport are from South East Cornwall. 70% of our health services, all the referrals go across the river to Plymouth. In my unique situation, my residents really need access to those services. That's always my focus. But I completely understand people's passion. I share that with how unique and special Cornwall is. And I think we've just got to make sure we're putting the right focus in the right place. And for me, that's always about service delivery.
So actually for you, Devon being more joined up with Cornwall wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing?
I think it really needs a cross-Cornwall discussion. Other people have different views to me. As I said, South East Cornwall is part of the travel to work area of Plymouth. A lot of our services are across the river. There's no point pretending it's any other way, but I'm a Cornish MP in a Cornish area, and I'm hugely supportive of that unique status.
Richard, obviously devolution isn't just to do with Devon and Cornwall. When you were leader of Wiltshire Council, you were heavily involved with those proposals to join up Wiltshire with Somerset and Dorset. You were a bit hesitant at the time about the role of a mayor, but do you see the benefits that it will bring? I mean, what's the update?
I still think a mayor in a large rural area is a bad idea. I think the strategic authority concept is good. I think that council leaders from whatever party, and I'm Bill Revan from Somerset, Nick Ireland, and both Lib Dems and myself were working very well together. There was no party politics in there, trying to work out what the best thing for that Wessex footprint would be. So mayors, if the mayor becomes a little egocentric, and we've seen them crop up, mayors can be damaging. If mayors are consensual and build alliances and bring people together, they can be great. But it's putting that point of failure in one person, and I just don't think that works from a rural context. Your point about, I mean, yes, Cornwall, you get me in trouble with Cornish people every time I come on the show. Cornwall is unique, but the New Forest is unique. Once a year, everyone jumps on ponies and rounds up the horses. Everywhere is unique.
It's quite
Nowhere
different
can
in
answer.
Cornwall because we have national minority status, which has a different language,
yes,
and that is actually part of a Council of Europe that we need to take seriously.
But we live in geographies that aren't actually defined by lines on the map. They're defined by where we go and what we do, crossing the river. So we have to draw strategic boundaries somewhere. If we're going to make devolution work, we can't be too isolated. We can't be protective. Devolution, it's about empowering communities all the way down the train, which means government's got to trust councils, or mayors have to trust councils have to trust town councils, parish councils, they have to trust people. And that's hard, and we're not doing it yet, and we can't be protective if it's going to work.
Max, do you buy into the idea of greater devolution, or do you think, given using Cornwall as an example, talking about its uniqueness in the House of Commons, do you think that the government has kind of picked an unnecessary fight with different parts of the country?
Well, one of the reasons I'm a Liberal and Liberal Democrat is because I believe in community empowerment and devolution. And one of the reasons I think the government is getting it wrong is because actually what I'm going to see in my local area, many areas around the country, is fewer powers in their local area as a result of this. Now, in Cheltenham, I'm really concerned that we're going to end up in a large unitary authority for the whole of Gloucestershire, and then Gloucestershire is going to be put into probably the west of England. I think that is the default, and I don't think that's necessarily a terrible thing. Gloucestershire is in the west. Most of Gloucestershire would identify with the west. But really what this needs to be about is community empowerment as well at the same time. So as Richard said, so we can have a mayor, and again, I'm somewhat sceptical of having a mayor for a big region like this, but it's going to happen, so there's no point in me carrying on whinging about it. A mayor that works with unitary authorities that then works with local communities. Cheltenham Borough Council is not going to exist. That has been the authority that speaks for my town. when that no longer exists and we've got a Gloucestershire unitary, is the voice of my community being diluted? I would suggest it definitely is going to be diluted. And what needs to happen as part of the devolution arrangement actually is a much more ambitious way of devolving power to communities, but also over time I would like to see more powers taken out of Westminster here and given to the regions and to local areas and communities. And that means this area, this part of the country, Westminster, being a lot bolder in its vision for devolution, because at the moment it's not quite there.
I think that's really disappointing to hear when you're saying what you want to hear and see is more devolved powers and finances coming down to local communities. I mean, that's exactly what the government is delivering. And I think when you look at the actual power discussions that are happening, I mean, this is one of the biggest transfers of power out of Westminster in a generation.
But
and actually, when you say that you want that, it'd be good to welcome what you're seeing delivered.
But there's no clarity on it. Firstly, the funding has dried up, so all the new potential mayoralties are suddenly being told, well, actually, there's no money, and then we're not getting. Yes, if we could get National Highways to the Department for Transport to actually give some power and give some funding and control regionally, that would be great. But we're not seeing it come yet. We were promised it, and the latest bills doesn't mention climate. It's very woolly on the actual powers. We desperately need some clarity if that's going to work. Because you're right, we do need to devolve. Germany, look at the success Germany makes through regional government. It's not a bad thing.
Anna,
Absolutely.
do you think that some of your Cornish colleagues who have spoken publicly about their views on a mayor, a shared mayor, for example, with Devon, do you think that actually this would all happen much quicker if they accepted that they might need to have a mayor?
I don't speak for my other colleagues. You know, my view on this is it's good that we have agreement in general terms across politics that we want to see more empowerment and more finances, decisions coming down to local areas. In terms of speed, for South East Cornwall, I speak on what's right for them. It is a difficult one, and I hear your points. It's difficult, we need to get it right. It's part of a process, and often these processes are not nearly as quick as people want to see them.
Well, look, it's now up to Steve Reid, who takes on the baton to roll out this greater devolution, and I'm sure this won't be the last time that we'll be talking about it on the West Country Debate. We're at the end of tonight's programme, but we can't say goodbye before bringing you what I think actually is the biggest story of Westminster today. Jenny, as you can see her here, the guide dog of Torbay MP Steve Darling, I'm sure everybody on our panel will recognise her. She won the Public, if you got that, the public vote, in this year's Dog of the Year competition in SW1. Look at her there. I'm lucky enough to say I've met Jenny a few times, and she's always absolutely lovely. And Max is nodding there as well. There'll be no competition for who's the big dog in Westminster then. As I said, that's all we've got time for tonight. Join us again on next month's The West Country Debate. Goodbye.